He didn't lose his company because of the fire. He lost it because he let everyone convince him that he had. The explosion at the Adelaide Street site had happened on a February morning, when the temperature in Toronto had dropped to -19, and the site foreman had sent most of the crew home early. Alaric Dumont had been walking the 14th floor himself. He always did when he wanted to think clearly, when the ordinary noise of the office felt too managed, too curated, when 3 ignition points went off in sequence close enough together that the first blast threw him against the railing and the second caught his right side as he fell. The fire marshal's report listed the cause as probable electrical fault. Alaric read it twice and said nothing. 3 simultaneous ignition points on a freshly inspected floor were not a probable electrical fault. They were a message. What the fire took from him, the full function of his right hand, a stretch of skin along his forearm and the right side of his jaw that would never entirely forget what had happened to it, and 6 weeks of his life inside a rehabilitation unit on University Avenue. What the fire left behind, a condo in the distillery district retrofitted for medical equipment, a physiotherapy schedule he kept with grim precision, and the working knowledge that the people he'd trusted most had begun making decisions in the space his absence created. Sandrine Lacroix stayed 11 days. Someone on the household staff had counted. 11 days of visiting the burn unit, kissing the air near his undamaged cheek, taking calls in the hallway in a lowered voice. Then she relocated to her family's Rosedale house, citing the need to process, to hold things together from a distance. She kept the ring. A cushion-cut diamond he'd bought with his own money, not inherited money. The distinction had mattered to him once. She wore it to charity events. She told her friends she was managing things. What she was actually doing, as Alaric would eventually confirm from his own server records, was meeting twice a week with Hollis Garand, his CFO, in a Yorkville restaurant he'd always disliked. Fallon Maguire arrived on a Thursday in March, when the last ice was pulling back from the cobblestones outside, and the lake had started to show something other than grey. She came from Northern Care Services with a kit bag on her shoulder and a transit pass in her jacket pocket, because the agency ran mileage reimbursements on a 30-day lag, and she couldn't float the cost of gas. The housekeeper showed her to the master suite and mentioned that Mr. Dumont preferred silence before 9 in the morning. Then she left. Alaric heard the door and didn't turn from the window. The sky over the lake was the flat pewter of late winter, and he'd been watching it since before 5. "Good morning, Mr. Dumont." Her voice was even and practical, the kind that didn't climb at the ends of sentences, that didn't soften itself for a difficult room. "I'm going to set up. I'll let you know when I'm ready." She didn't ask how he'd slept. She didn't comment on the view. She set her bag on the medical cart with a clean, decisive sound and began laying out supplies with the efficiency of someone who had done this thousands of times and saw no reason to perform it. He watched her in the window glass. She moved without hesitation, assessing the space, noting the positioning of the equipment the previous nurses had left, adjusting 2 things without being asked. "You're the 4th one," he said. A pause of exactly 1 second. "I know. The agency briefed me." The 3rd one left after 2 sessions. The first 2 lasted a week. "That's not useful information for either of us." She pulled on a pair of gloves. "Are you ready? Or do you want another few minutes?" No one had asked him that before. The others had either advanced immediately with bright, managing voices, or waited for his permission, as though he was something fragile. She was asking him as though it were a plain question with a plain answer, and either answer was acceptable. "I'm ready," he said. She worked methodically, without the narration the others had used. Step by step, here comes the warm compress. This might feel a little tight, the kind of narration that was really just filling silence because they didn't know what to do with his silence. Fallon filled nothing. She assessed the graft sites on his hand and forearm with focused attention, checked the tissue along his jaw with the same expression she'd use reading a technical document, not clinical in the cold sense, but in the concentrated sense, as though whatever she found there actually mattered. "The graft on your palm is integrating better than projected." She made a note on her clipboard. "Are you doing the compression exercises?" "Every day." "Show me." He did. She watched, adjusted the angle of his fingers without comment, and continued. "Why are you here?" The question came out before he'd decided to ask it. She looked up. "It's Thursday." "I mean, in this building. You're not new. You could have turned down the file." Fallon set her pen down against the clipboard. She looked at him with the same assessing directness she'd just used on the graft sites. Not unkind, just honest. $42 an hour, she said. "After the agency's cut, I take home 31. My younger brother Wyatt needs a cardiac procedure." The public waitlist has it at 14 months out. Private is $60,000. She picked up the pen again. That's why I'm here. He said nothing for a moment. Most people would have invented something more presentable, he said. Most people aren't $19,000 short of a surgery deposit. She closed the documentation. Same time tomorrow, Mr. Dumont. Try to sleep before 2. She left without looking back. He sat with the door closed behind her and felt, for the first time in 6 weeks, like something that had been looked at directly. By the 4th week, the routine had become functional in the way that real routines do. Not comfortable exactly, but load-bearing. Fallon arrived at 8:30, worked through the morning care, reviewed the physiotherapy notes from Tuesday, elevated his hand while he answered emails left-handed with a patience that had taken 3 weeks to develop. She didn't speak unless there was something worth saying. She didn't require him to perform recovery or gratitude or good humor. She required him to do the exercises correctly and to sleep more than 5 hours, and she said so plainly when he didn't. Sandrine came on a Wednesday afternoon without calling ahead. She swept through the main entrance in a camel coat and the perfume she'd worn since university, and she stopped in the kitchen doorway when she saw Fallon seated at the table updating wound care records. "Who are you?" Sandrine asked. "Wound care specialist." Fallon didn't stand up. Sandrine looked at her for a moment with the expression of someone confronting an unexpected item on a menu. Then she moved past into the living room, where Alaric was at his desk working through a contract one-handed with the particular economy of motion he'd spent weeks developing. The visit lasted 40 minutes. From the kitchen, Fallon could hear the shape of it without the words. Sandrine's voice performing brightness over a harder undertone, Alaric's responses short and without warmth. When Sandrine came back through the kitchen, she didn't look at Fallon directly. She looked at the middle distance while she buttoned her coat. "He's not going to recover the way people are hoping," Sandrine said to no particular audience. "You should think about that. About how long this situation realistically continues." Fallon kept writing, "I'll reach out if I need career advice." Sandrine left, the elevator closed. Fallon brought Alaric his afternoon medications without comment. He was sitting at his desk, not reading the contract. "Hollis moved the shareholders' call," he said, "3rd time in 6 weeks, without clearing it with me. What does moving it give him?" Alaric set the contract down. He was looking at the window. It delays the quarterly review, gives him more time to restructure the board's access to the project accounts. A pause. He's been running parallel negotiations with a developer in Mississauga, selling our bid packages, using my name on the correspondence. Fallon sat across from him, not deferentially, just sat the way she sat when there was thinking to do. "Do you have the server records?" "I have access. I haven't looked yet." "Why not?" He was quiet. When he spoke, it was in the same flat factual tone she'd learned meant he was being careful with himself. "Because once I look, I have to do something about it, and right now I'm—" He stopped. She waited. "I can't walk into a boardroom and be what I was," he said. "No," Fallon said. She was looking at him steadily. "But Hollis Garand has never once in his life walked into a room because he was physically impressive. He walks in because people assume he belongs there." She paused. "You walk in because you built the room." He looked at her. "Pull the server record," she said. What Hollis had been doing was patient and layered and, in a different context, might have been admirable for its precision. 14 months of parallel correspondence. Bid packages forwarded to the Mississauga developer on Dumont letterhead. Alaric's digital signature extracted from a filed contract and dropped into communications he had never seen. A third revenue stream, carefully siloed, running quiet alongside the legitimate business like a second heartbeat no one was supposed to hear. Alaric read through it for 2 hours without speaking. Then he looked up and said, "Get me the charcoal suit." Fallon looked up from her medical log, the one from the front closet or the wardrobe. "Wardrobe. And I need to book the conference room on the 8th floor of the Bay Street building for 9 tomorrow." She made the call. When she came back, she laid the suit across the back of the chair and stood in front of him. "Your right cuff link," she said. "The clasp sticks. You've been wearing the left one alone for 2 weeks." She held out her hand. He passed her the cuff link. She had it working in under a minute. In the morning, she spent half an hour on logistics he hadn't asked her to consider: which documents to carry in his left hand, how to position his right at the table to read as deliberate rather than compensating. She stood in front of him in the kitchen and looked at him with the same attention she brought to everything, the attention that didn't miss things. "Hollis is going to try to make you look diminished," she said. "He'll do it carefully. He'll let the room do it for him. I know. You've already won. The emails, the transfer records, 14 months of documented fraud. The meeting is the announcement, not the battle. She adjusted the collar of his jacket, a small, precise correction. You built that company with a working right hand and 23 employees, and a lease on a 3-room office in Scarborough. You can take it back with one good hand and a laptop. He looked at her for a moment. Come with me. She shook her head. I'm not a bodyguard. No. He held her gaze, but Hollis has never once been made to feel accountable. He should meet someone who will. A beat of silence. Let me get my coat, she said. The 8th-floor conference room looked out over Bay Street in the flat light of early April. By 9:15, 7 people were seated around the table who had each, in varying degrees, decided that Alaric Dumont was no longer the functional authority at his own company. Hollis Garand had taken the head of the table. He was smooth and prepared, and his expression, when Alaric walked in and placed himself at that position without hesitation, registered nothing. Fallon stood near the credenza at the side wall. Still, she wasn't there to speak. Hollis produced a look of concerned warmth. Alaric, we weren't expecting you today. I know. Alaric opened the folder in front of him. That's the point. He walked through it without theatrics, the server records, the extracted signature, the Mississauga correspondence, the transfer amounts and dates. He placed printed copies in front of each person at the table with his left hand, steady, without rushing. When he finished, the room was very quiet. Hollis tried. He was good at trying. These records are out of context. The Mississauga conversations were exploratory, preliminary. The invoices aren't preliminary. Alaric slid one page across the table. This one has your home address on the remittance line. Hollis's eyes moved briefly to Fallon, a quick involuntary search for the weak point in the room. Fallon looked back at him without expression. Alaric reached for the water glass on his right side, his right hand, the grafted one, the one that still occasionally did not do what he intended, caught the edge of the glass as he lifted it. For a second, it tilted. Hollis saw it. Something crossed his face, fast and small and unmistakable. And then Fallon was simply there, setting a full glass at Alaric's left with the unhurried matter-of-factness of someone resetting a supply tray, as though the entire exchange were entirely unremarkable, which in her handling of it, it was. Hollis's expression went flat. Alaric didn't look at either of them. He kept his eyes on his CFO. The board reviewed the records this morning. You've been removed from signing authority as of 40 minutes ago. He paused, one full breath. You have 20 minutes to return your access cards to reception, then I'd like you to leave. Hollis stood up. The professional surface had come apart somewhere in the last 10 minutes, and what was underneath it was harder and uglier and finally honest. You've been sitting in that condo for 2 months, Hollis said, with the particular cruelty of someone who has already lost. You can barely use your hand. You think the clients trust you? The banks? You're a liability. Everything I did to protect the company while you were. Pack your things, Alaric said quietly. We're done. Hollis left. The room exhaled in various directions. The harder moment came 11 days later, and from a direction Fallon hadn't anticipated. She was in the hallway outside Alaric's office when her phone rang. The care coordinator at St. Michael's, a woman whose voice she'd learned to read over months of phone calls. She listened. There was an opening in Wyatt's surgery queue, 6 weeks out. A deposit confirmation needed in 72 hours to hold the slot. $60,000. Fallon had 41. She was 19,000 short, and the gap had the particular weight of a number she'd been carrying so long it had started to feel like part of her skeleton. She went back into the office. Alaric looked up from his laptop. She told him, plainly, the same way she'd told him about the $42 an hour the first morning. Go home. Be with Wyatt. I have 2 more sessions to document. Fallon. His voice was quieter than the boardroom voice, quieter than the voice he used for instructions. Go home. She went. She sat with Wyatt in his apartment on Dundas West and watched the end of a hockey game neither of them was following, and didn't tell him about the 19,000 because there was no point carrying him into a number she hadn't closed. The next morning there was an envelope on her kit bag, white, letter-sized, her name in Alaric's left handwriting, which had been getting steadier every week. She opened it in the hallway, a bank draft, $60,000, the full amount. She stood with it for a moment. Then she walked into the office. He was at the window. Not the posture of the first morning, not the flat, waiting-for-nothing posture of a man who had already written himself off. He was standing, looking out at the lake, which had gone green with the spring. This is too much, she said. It's the right amount. I don't need charity. It isn't. He turned. His gaze was direct and unhurried. It's a retainer. I'm asking you to stay on permanently, not through the agency, directly. Personal care and operational coordination. I need someone who knows how this building runs and isn't afraid of what she finds. Fallon looked at the draft in her hands, then at him. You called St. Michael's, she said. It wasn't a question. 3 times. The cardiac team is excellent. The attending trained in Montreal. He's done the procedure 40 times. I wanted to confirm the slot was legitimate before you counted on it. She exhaled, something in her chest that had been braced for months, since the diagnosis, since the first estimate, since the first time she'd done the arithmetic and come up short, released. Not dramatically, quietly, the way a muscle unclenches when you finally set down a bag you'd forgotten you were carrying. Thank you, she said. 2 words, undecorated, the only way either of them said things that mattered. She put the draft in her inside pocket, set her kit bag on the cart, and pulled on her gloves. Ready? She asked. Yes, he said. Sandrine Lacroix had been watching the company's project pipeline from a careful distance when it became clear that Hollis's removal had not collapsed Dumont Construction, that the accounts were active, the bank relationships intact, the Adelaide Street Tower back under contract. She did what Fallon had half expected. She recalibrated. 3 days before Wyatt's surgery date, Fallon's phone rang with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was a patient services administrator at St. Michael's, apologetic and formal, informing her that due to a donor relations issue, Wyatt's slot was under review. The particulars were vague. The tone was not. She knew the shape of it immediately. She found Alaric in the office. She told him what had happened without editorializing. He didn't reach for his phone. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and removed a USB drive, which he set on the desk between them. When I went through Hollis's server records, he said, I found correspondence that included a third party. A senator's office, facilitating expedited permits for the Mississauga developer in exchange for a consideration I expect he would prefer not to see in print. He paused. The senator's name is Lacroix. Fallon looked at the drive, then at him. He doesn't know we have it, Alaric said. Sandrine doesn't know. They moved against Wyatt because they thought you were the lever. They thought if they pressed you hard enough you'd. He stopped. It's yours. Do whatever you think is right. She picked up the drive. It was small and warm in her palm. Call Wyatt's care coordinator, she said. Tell her to hold the slot. I'll be back in an hour. The patient services entrance at St. Michael's was bright with the particular fluorescent brightness of institutional buildings in late afternoon. Sandrine was in the waiting area near the reception desk in a cream blazer, composed and prepared, with the expression of someone who had done difficult things before and considered herself capable of doing them again. Beside her, Senator Roland Lacroix. No, wait. I need to check. Roland is on the list. Let me use a different first name. Gerald is on the list too. Gerald Ferris. Senator Beaumont is on list, but Armand Lacroix is a different character. Armand is on the used list. Bernard Hale is on list. Senator Hugh is not on the list. Good. Senator Hugh Lacroix, a tall man with grey at his temples and the unhurried posture of someone who had spent 30 years being deferred to. Fallon walked through the automatic doors. She'd taken the subway. She didn't slow down crossing the lobby. Sandrine saw her and produced a thin, satisfied expression. Well, the agency sent someone to negotiate. I'm not negotiating. Fallon stopped in front of Senator Lacroix. She looked up at him without adjusting her posture or her voice. Senator, Permit File 44C, Mississauga Development Corridor. The correspondence dated last September from your deputy's office. The consideration paid in 3 tranches to a numbered company registered in the Cayman Islands. She held up the drive between 2 fingers. You've had 14 months to hope nobody found this. It's been found. The senator's expression did not change immediately. Then it did. The color left his face in a way that was almost clinical to watch. Sandrine. His voice came out without the polish it had entered with. We're leaving. What? Sandrine looked between them. Dad, she's a nurse. We're leaving right now. Sandrine turned to Fallon with the specific fury of someone watching a plan collapse around them. You think this makes you something? You're staff. You've always been staff. When he gets tired of the novelty of you, you'll be. Drive carefully, Fallon said. The gardener's unpredictable this time of year. She held the door. Senator Lacroix had his daughter's arm and was already moving. Sandrine went, still talking, her voice cutting off as the automatic door slid closed behind them. Fallon turned to the administrator, who was standing very still near the desk. Whit Maguire, Fallon said. Please confirm his surgical slot is secured for Thursday. Of course, the administrator said. I'll confirm it now. She took the subway back to the distillery district as the city was pulling its lights on in the early dark of an April evening. The lake at the end of the cobblestone street was black and reflecting and quietly enormous, the way it always was in the hours when the day's business was done and the water had nothing left to perform. Alaric was in the chair by the window, not working, just present, the way he'd learned to be in the months since February, not waiting for something better, but actually occupying the moment he was in. The fire was going. The room smelled like wood smoke and the specific quietness of a long day reaching its end. Fallon hung up her coat and sat down on the couch across from him. She set the USB drive on the table between them. It's handled, she said. He nodded once. Wyatt's confirmed for Thursday. Good. A pause. I called the attending this afternoon to brief him on the updated file. He said the imaging looks very clean. She looked at him. He had called the attending. Of course he had. You didn't tell me, she said. I didn't want you to spend the afternoon managing my involvement instead of managing the problem. He met her eyes. Did I overstep? She was quiet for a moment. No, she said. The fire made its sounds. Outside, King Street carried its ordinary noise. The clang of the streetcar, someone's car horn from the direction of Parliament, a pair of voices in the cobblestone lane below. Regular sounds, the sounds of a city that didn't know or care what the day had held and was simply continuing. Fallon leaned forward with her elbows on her knees. She wasn't someone who filled silence with words to make it more comfortable. Neither was he. It was one of the things that had made this work in the beginning, before it became something else. When I took this file, she said, I had a list of things I thought it was. A difficult client. A complicated wound history. Good pay. She looked at the fire. I didn't think it was this. He didn't ask what she meant by this, he knew. Fallon. His voice was low and specific, the way it was when he was saying something he'd considered. When the fire happened, I thought that was the end of the version of my life that made sense to me. I thought Sandrine was right in a way. Not that I was finished, but that I was changed into something I didn't recognize yet. He paused. You came in and saw the same version of me that I thought was gone. I don't know how you did that, but I need you to know that I see it. She turned to look at him. The graphed lines along his jaw in the firelight, the right hand resting on the arm of the chair, unhidden, at ease, in a way it had taken months to reach. The eyes that had been flat and waiting for nothing in February and were something else entirely now. She moved from the couch to the arm of his chair, not performing anything, not dramatizing, just closing the distance in the straightforward way she did everything, because the distance had become unnecessary and there was no reason to maintain it. His hand found hers. His grip was steady and warm and without qualification. Stay, he said. I'm not going anywhere, Fallon said. 2 weeks later, the 42nd floor conference room in the Dumont building on Bay Street, the actual floor, the permanent one, with the city visible in every direction through floor-to-ceiling glass, was full. Project leads, a new CFO promoted from within, 2 senior partners from the bank, a representative from the city's infrastructure office. Alaric sat at the head of the table in the charcoal suit, right hand resting on the table without concealment, posture exactly what it had always been when he was at his best, not forceful in any performed way, just fully present. The room oriented toward him the way rooms had always oriented toward him before the fire. The way they'd continued to do it turned out, through the fire, through everything. The door opened. Fallon came in. She didn't walk behind the chair. She walked to the seat at his right hand, set down her portfolio, and sat. The room adjusted, not with surprise or awkwardness, with recognition, the specific, quiet recognition that the woman who had just sat down was exactly where she was supposed to be. Under the table, his hand found hers. Let's begin, he said. And the room, which had waited long enough, listened. If you loved watching Alaric find his way back, and Fallon proved that real loyalty is the most powerful thing in any room, hit the like button right now. Share this story with someone who knows that strength isn't about what you can see on the outside. And tell us in the comments, what was your moment, when Fallon faced the senator or when Alaric said stay? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story from Love Chief.